Boom. According to that, I'm live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight 2. My name is Yuko Simon. Good to see you as always. We've got lots of people there in the comments. A fair number of topics tonight. I am going to challenge to try to get it done within the hour, as I do every week, and fail. But I'm really going to try this week, so we'll see how I go. One thing, I got a new thingy. I tweeted about this earlier. I got a pulp filter. So it means when I speak close to the mic like this, I realize when I listen back that just moving slightly affects the volume. This won't really change that. I mean, I've got to be careful about keeping my mouth the same distance from the mic the whole time. But what it will help with is when I breathe and so on, it will stop the exploding sounds on the mic. So we'll see if it works. Anyway, it was super cheap. It was like $10. So I've got that on the mic. I used to have like a big round thing, but it was hard to keep in the right place. So yeah, I've got new stuff. We had no technical issues tonight. Just took a minute to buffer the feed. I already see we've got a bunch of people watching, so that's great to see. 16 people already, according to the YouTube statistics. Let's see who's in here this week. Before we kick off, we've got Steve from Berkeley. Andrea Moboya, yeah, good to see you. You're watching the men's tennis final, so I'm glad you had a reason to be with us, especially with daylight saving there in Australia and New Zealand, at least New South Wales and Victoria, not in Queensland, of course. But excellent to see you. We've got Odie Jr., we've got Aaron, boom, boom, Shake the Room, Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff. I can actually do that entire song. That's a thing that for some reason when I was in... was I in university or was I in high school? But yes, I memorized that whole thing once for some reason. We got Shubhas, you're early. Well, great to have you. I mean, I know it's early there in Panama, and it's excellent to have you there in the chat. So good to see you. Who else we got in here? We got Odie Jr. Tech Art too. Good to see you, Tech Art too. Good to have you here in the chat. We've also got maybe you had to take a constitutional. I don't know what that means. I did not fall asleep, and I did, well, I was just a bit slow. That's all. That happens. I'm a bit slow. You have to forgive me that. Quinn Rankid, good to see you, Quinn Rankid. Chris Jack, hi, Chris Jack, good to see you. We've got the Red Value. Excellent to see you. Your cloud app is doing some crazy, awesome progress. That's right. I talked with the Red Value offline about some cloud stuff he was doing. That is super cool. That's something you should learn, by the way. I mean, I can't talk. It's a little bit close to I don't talk about current job stuff, but you should learn cloud stuff seriously. Like that much I can say. Ben Duncan, our King of Kanto. First of all, excellent to see you. Hello indeed. We've got Ben Duncan. Now he can say paprika, I guess. Good to see you, Ben Duncan. There in the comments from Tokyo Digital Crew. Akuhe, excellent. Hello, good to see you. Budley Salterton, excellent to see you. Good to have you back in the chat. We've got Subaru the car. Hello from Saitama. Good to have Saitama watching. Hey out there, the sort of New Jersey of Japan. But yeah, no, so Saitama's pretty cool. We've got Will. Hello. Remember, as always, the rules are not even rules really. They're just a thing. If you're watching, I love it when people say hello, especially if you've never had the courage to put a comment in before. It's just say hello. It's just nice to see who's there. I love saying hello to all of the names. I also love you guys having a chat there in the comments. And remember, as always, you can draw my attention like Akuhe did by doing an @Yuko Simon. I will generally notice that. If I don't get to it right away, I will scan back and make sure I try to catch them. I take requests. If there's anything you'd like me to talk about, anything you'd like to comment towards me, anything that you would like me to talk about, or a question you'd like me to answer, anything, @Yuko Simon, I will generally notice it. Probably chatting to myself. I do that all the time. I'm a little bit worried right now. See, when I see that, I get a little bit spooked. Like, what if the sound isn't going through, and what if I really am talking to myself? But no, I can see that the feed, the YouTube thing is telling me that it's working. So I'm going to take YouTube at its word. But yes. Come on, okay, so everybody's been waiting for me to show up. I have now showed up. We are live. We are on time. A federal government in Australia. The budget there came out in Australia last week. No comment. Businesses are dead. The politicians have their salaries. Indeed, I do take requests. Yes, I'm like a wedding DJ basically, except I talk about Japanese news. But you know, if you are into DJs who just talk news, then I am your guy. So yeah, let's dive in. I've been thinking, by the way, it's something it doesn't bother me. Obviously, if it bothered me more, I would have actually fixed it. Devoid, good to see you. Hello from Arizona. Good to have Arizona in the house. I think once again, I think I've seen the name before, but excellent to see you again early in the morning. I do appreciate that. One thing I've been thinking about, informal quick poll. Lately with the algorithm, it is true that just doing a long format live show once a week, I am consistent. But it's not a great way to grow the channel. I'm obviously not living off YouTube, and I'm not stressed out about subscriber growth and stuff like that. But there again, of course, I am interested in if there are people who are interested in this content, helping them to discover it. And it's not, YouTube generally it doesn't really promote live content very well anymore. So my subscriptions have been flat for about a year. I mean, I've got a few. I sort of lose a few, I guess, people who sort of realize, oh, I've still got that channel somewhere in my subscriptions. Again, most people don't even use subscriptions, actually. But one thing I do realize is that a good way to have people discover your channel is just to carve out some easy to digest, small sort of bite-sized videos, like 4 or 5 minute videos that people can sort of see and get a sense of what it's about. And I guess a really easy way to do that is if I was just more structured about how I talked, or I could just cut from beginning to end where I've talked about, maybe pick out a couple of the most interesting stories. And if I put those up during the week, of course, for the people watching this live, it wouldn't matter because there'll be cuts out of the live show. But I suppose it's a good way to help people find out what what we're doing here. And I'm kind of thinking it wouldn't be that much effort, but I do have a busy, this fits with my routine, and committing to even just cutting out and posting those extra videos. It'll end up being, if I did that for like 3 videos, although you could focus and I could say, oh, I could do that in 5 minutes. In the end of the day, with all the sort of playing around and the settings that you put onto the video and everything, it would take about an hour, maybe more than an hour a week. And it's something I don't want to do. I mean, this is an hour on its own. So this would be like doubling the amount of time I spend on YouTube. And my time is at a bit of a premium. It's one of those things I'd sort of really like to do, but I'm curious what people think if I should do that. I'm almost tempted actually to ask for some help. I'm sure if I got somebody who could help me with that, just take the live show, put a nice intro and ending on it, just cut out a nice snippet. Then I'll make it so that all I need to do is just talk coherently and not meander, although that's probably impossible. But if I can be disciplined talking about a story for like in 5 minute chunks and then go into the discussion afterwards, but make it so that it's easy to edit with bookends, I could probably do better on the channel. Sometimes I think I could do better with this, but I'm always very cautious about not wanting to overextend myself, because that's how YouTube channels end. It's when people get overwhelmed by the workload that they put on themselves, and then they think I need a break, and then when they're on a break they're thinking, man, that's too much work, I can't do this, and then they don't come back. That's how people end YouTube. The reason I've stayed on YouTube for longer than I care to say, I think I started in 2007 or 2008, 12 years. It might have been later than but you know what, it was probably 2008. The reason I've stayed is that I've kept it at a pace that I can manage, and I've seen really good channels come and go. So I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that's a good idea? I guess if you're watching this, it says that you don't really need to watch replay snippets, but there again, I'm just thinking if it might be good for the channel. I enjoy watching videos, and I admit myself that when I download and I watch videos, I pay for YouTube. So it means that my clicks contribute more to the viewers, but it also means I can download videos offline. I find that helpful, so I'm not at the mercy of the Wi-Fi or the train, which I'm not using lately, but I still find it convenient. But yes. So what I'm asking is, what do you think about the idea of me creating, would it be annoying to you? Would it actually put you off if I had 2 or 3 uploaded videos during the week? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's a bad idea? I am curious to hear what people think about the idea of me putting up more videos, but basically carving out videos from this. So we'll see. Shibas only uses subscriptions. That's why I made my Chan TV, which is still going through some stuff at the moment that I've got to get back to. It's another thing where I just don't have enough time to do all the things I want to do. But yes, good on you for following subscriptions, Shibas. I do appreciate that. I think it is the best way, because the algorithm is out to get you. Tokyo 503, excellent to see you. And we've got Sergeant Bilko rocking in. Good to see that. Andrea Mulware, sing us a song of sixpence. Sing a song of sixpence. You know what? I can remember bits and pieces of it, but I could not sing the whole song off the top of my head, so I'm sorry. I would if I could, but I can't, so I won't. But thank you for asking. Sergeant Bilka, who else we got in here who's rocked in? Sometimes it jumps ahead on its own when I'm trying to roll. We've got Andy DeVirgo. Good to see you, Andy DeVirgo. Good to see you working hard. How am I? By the way, I resemble this guy in this group called Electric Fields. I am curious to look that up right now. Maybe someone can look it up and say, is that legit? Although, there again, it's probably not hard for me to look like somebody who looks like me. I mean, generally there's a lot of simplification going on, which I'm cool with. It must be a very, very good-looking guy. Thank you for the recommendation, Andy DeVirgo. I'm going to try to remember. I'm going to actually write that down right now so I look it up later, just because I'm curious. Electric Fields Dude. Electric Fields Dude. You see, I do take requests. I'll just write that down. I don't know if that's a request, but yes, indeed. Have we got everyone caught up? Then I'm going to jump into the topics otherwise. A pocket full of rye. Is that what it was? Papa Power, hello from Texas, 36 degrees Celsius. I thank you for the Celsius. I do appreciate it. And wow, it is hot in Texas. And it's like in autumn as well. Fall, as you would say. I do appreciate it. So 36, that's like... Is that like 100? I don't know. I have no idea how to convert that, but I appreciate the conversion. And that is hot, so take care of yourself. Drink lots of fluids. Yeah, good to see that. Sergeant Bilko, a few uploaded videos a week are probably okay if they're shorter. That's what I'm thinking, like 5 minutes. The algorithm is scary. It has noticed that people talking about butter will trigger me, and it sort of quasi-censors it. But there we go. Andrea Mulboy, this live stream needs to continue, otherwise you'll miss the butter emojis, indeed. Odie Jr. looks like a New Zealand version of Mr. Clean. I don't know what that means, but there we go. Plays the piano. I will check it out. Thank you for the suggestion. Let's get into the stories. It's already 15 minutes in. 27 degrees here in Melbourne. Well, you are in for, well, that's the start of the year. Or start of the summer, so I guess get ready for that. It's been freezing cold, by the way, the last few days. We just had a typhoon. It was typhoon number 14. I like numbering. I don't like the idea that people's lives get ruined by being named after typhoons that kill people. This one was heading to Tokyo, but it sort of veered away at the last minute. But it made it very cold, and it gave us a lot of rain. It was actually a lot warmer tonight, just after the rain stopped. But it was nice to go out running, actually, when it wasn't too hot. So, yeah, butter ban, it's doing that. Anyway, so let's dive in. Let's see how I go. The endless story. I'm not going to linger on this. I think you guys know about this as well, but it's not a good thing, and it's continuing. Well, it's a complicated thing, of course, but the victims of conscripted war labor during World War II from Korea, again, conscripted that. They were not paid, so can be legitimately called slave labor, but they're forced laborers basically from Korea that were brought over to Japan to work in Japanese factories in World War II. Of course, in Korea, they've carried out lawsuits against the successor companies of those companies that owned the factories that they worked in World War II. And while until now damages were not awarded in these cases because South Korea and Japan settled, Japan paid a huge lump sum to settle all claims relating to World War II and colonization. In fact, it was a mutual settlement up. Korea did actually pay Japan something, or they offset the investments that Japan put in things like infrastructure and so on in South Korea. But all in all, the purpose was to settle all outstanding claims so that the two countries could commence having diplomatic relations. Japan paid some money. However, the South Korean side, which was still recovering from the Civil War, this is 1965, they decided not to publish that they did a deal with Japan or the details of it, and they decided rather than give all the money that Japan gave them out to the victims of colonialism in World War II to actually invest it in national infrastructure, roads, train, electricity, stuff like that, stuff which enabled the Korean economic miracle. But of course, the problem is that the people who needed the compensation never got it, even though from Japan's perspective they did pay and settle the cases. So while these cases have been brought in South Korea, the government in South Korea and the courts have generally I don't know how they've done it, given that it was kept secret from the Korean people, but they've generally pushed back on not allowing claims to be brought against Japan. However, Supreme Court in South Korea found that they could make such claims, which Japan complains violates the the treaty that established diplomatic relations between Japan and Korea, where Japan already paid compensation for this, and they argued that it's something that the South Korean government needs to deal with. However, the South Korean government says that the court said it, they're entitled to it. So their hands are tied, and the result of that, what's changed this week, months ago they made this ruling, actually, and this is what triggered the whole drama that happened just before COVID came out between South Korea and Japan, was really triggered off by this court decision and the lack of willingness of the current Korean administration to intervene, saying that, hey, diplomatic relations with Japan, we have a treaty with them, so we have to deal with it a different way. They stepped back and they said they won't intervene. The court confiscated a bunch of shares of the company or something like that in South Korea, which they held, giving a period for a settlement to be worked out. The Japanese government told the companies, do not pay, do not settle, and they told the South Korean government, do not sell off the shares and turn them into cash for compensation, because that'll breach the treaty. However, of course, relations went into deep freeze. They went into a bit of a death spiral, and this week what happened was those shares which have been held for months and months, the court has cashed them in and is preparing to distribute the compensation. So basically they've kind of taken the final step of pulling the trigger. We'll have to wait and see. Abe was pretty strong about resolutely sort of opposing this, and this caused a lot of problems, and Suga was his spokesperson the whole time for this. There is an opportunity with the new Prime Minister, and South Korea seemed to think this as well when he kicked off saying, hey, why don't we reset? But Suga's come in and said that, we're not going to reset unless we're resetting on the basis that, first of all, you're going to respect the treaty between Japan and South Korea, i.e., Suga's just indicated he's going to probably continue on the way that Abe did, just saying that this is not acceptable and there's not going to be a deal about it with South Korea. And it sounds unacceptable. Again, from my perspective, the people who did the war labor should be absolutely compensated. They should be getting pensions. They should be getting compensation that they're entitled to, whether it comes from the Japanese government covering the Japanese companies, whether it comes directly from the Japanese companies, which of course now there's a big question over Japanese companies operating in South Korea, whether it should come from the Korean government that got the compensation. In the end of the day, it doesn't matter, but the people should be paid anyway. And the fact that the two governments are just allowing this to destroy relations, and in a way, this break could have been a good thing. It could have allowed things to get better, and instead they've just sort of done nothing, and they're just kicking off where they left off. There was a clock running on this from the court in South Korea, so we'll have to see. It's unfortunate that it is causing Japan and South Korea's relations to go in the crapper, and it's a shame, of course, that the whole issue is that people who should be compensated are not being compensated. But so that is a thing. It's just gotten worse again anyway. I see that there's some comments, a lot of censored ones. I see we've got Tikyo Sam there. Good to see you, Tikyo Sam. Emojis are just, it's not liking them. So the problem is, if I see that, I want to go back and fix them so you can see them, but I guess you can see them anyway. I don't know why, Steve from Berkeley, why YouTube is censoring butter. Odie Jr., butter, but it's okay with cucumber and French fries. I don't know why, but a broomstick is not. I don't know what it is saying about that. Aussie football is such a weird ground-based version of Quidditch. I think that's true. Butter, censored. So, by the way, if you put censored emojis, I want to go back and make them visible for you, or in fact, I am going to ignore it. Because it's too distracting to go back and fix them all. So sorry about that. You can see them anyway. I'm showing you the things. You can see that they're forbidden things. So anyway, that's what that is. In other news, the great purge of hankos continues in Japan. The Minister Taro Kono has been going crazy, of course, with the Ministry for Administrative Reform. And he said no hankos anywhere. So the Ministry of Justice, I believe, that administers things like paperwork for marriage and divorce, you will not need a hanko for that going forward. So I guess they're going to make that even easier. Just a funny small fact about Japan. Provided everybody involved is consenting to the procedure, both people need to be present and consenting. If you get two people to agree that they want to get married or they want to get divorced, it's really easy in Japan. The idea that in some places, you need to be, there's a whole bunch of criteria, you might need to do it in a church or in front of a justice of the peace or with a notary, and that there's all this sort of complex, ceremony around both marriage, and a lot of places make divorce very difficult. Like sometimes there'll be time periods, there'll be mandatory counseling or mediation or whatever and stuff like that. In Japan, you can get married and you can get divorced just by going to your local council office and filling in a form, like a change of address form or a new driver's license form. It is as simple as that. When I got back to Japan from New Zealand and we went up to the council to make sure we were registered in Japan, it was literally just filling in one sheet of paper and handing it over at the desk at the city council office. And if you want to get divorced, you can do it the same way. The problem is, of course, if the divorce is not entirely consensual, as it often isn't, it can be impossible to divorce without that consent. But in terms of like the idea that it used to be people would go to Nevada, they'd go to Vegas or whatever, because most states had such strict laws where they required, it took years to get divorced. In Japan, you can do it in 10 seconds. You can fill out a form and it's done. It always it's occurred to me, if you ever want to have a fight, I suppose you could just go up to council one day and get the form and just pull it out and put it on the table one day, and you can actually sign the form in the room and take it back and you're done. Of course, it's not that easy most of the time. In fact, getting divorced where someone is not cooperating with it is actually very difficult in Japan. But yes, going hanko free. So one less thing you have to do anyway to make a very easy procedure even more easy. The hanko is indeed dead. This person, it's kind of funny. I want to say, hey, this person is nuts, except it's funny. I've seen people point out the story here is about the idea that there needs to be more women's representation. I've heard some people talk about it as well, how when men want to be dismissive of women, they say, oh, she's nuts or she's hysterical or whatever. And it is a way that men, and honestly, actually women as well, put down women, right? It's actually kind of, and it's one of those things which isn't really fair in the sense that women and men acting the same way, men might be called a bully and a woman might be called crazy for the same behavior, and this affects so many things. Like when women go to a doctor and they describe symptoms of a heart attack, it used to be, and I'm sure it still is the case, that they'll be more likely to be prescribed like medicine for hysteria or psychological conditions, and men will be treated more seriously. It's part of the reason heart disease isn't detected in women as much, because doctors have a bias towards interpreting the same symptoms as being mental. So yeah, on the one hand, I don't want to be sexist. On the other hand, she really is mental. I mean, if she was a man saying, for example, that women lie all the time about sexual assault and gay people are unproductive and we shouldn't recognize them. I mean, she says stuff which, of course, many of the crazy men in the LDP say all the time. But this is Mio Sugita. She's on the party list. She's run in a bunch of elections, and she's never, like, even in a field of like 8 candidates for a city council, she came 8th. She only got like 40 votes. However, she got on the party list for the LDP, and the LDP, desperate for any women who want to actually be on their list, they put her high enough up that she got into parliament, even though she's never really won an election or been chosen by anyone other than the LDP putting her on the proportional representation list. But this is it. This is a party with 14% women in parliament. The only party with lower representation, funnily enough, is Komeito. Komeito is actually based on, or its foundation is a religious group. So I always thought that would be more diverse, but it's not. So, but anyway, the LDP doesn't have many women. And this woman is kind of made a name for herself by being like more outrageous and more misogynist than the men. And this article makes a really good point. It's an article it's an editorial in NHK talking about how when you're in an environment dominated by men, you might say that, if you've got women who are saying crazy things like this, the last thing, this would be why the LDP feels like they don't need more women. But on the other hand, the article, I think, points out correctly, in a lot of companies or a lot of environments that are dominated by men, what will often happen, and this happens, there's actually a thing on the BBC on this today as well, for cultural minorities, people who, you try to assimilate with the mass culture. And in some ways, in order to, be noticed and in order to sort of gain acceptance, sometimes you'll actually try to, be more like the culture that you're trying to have accept you than that. So, for example, women will sometimes act or say misogynist things, to be sort of one of the lads in a way. And this happens where some people will suppress their sort of culture. They'll try to act white, and they'll try to act like what they think I might act like. They'll try to act like a middle-aged bald white man, which is a sad, horrible, horrible thing. Of course, in the case of the LDP, they're trying to act like 80-year-old misogynist men. But this is it. Apparently, when she made the statement, and the illustration is when she made the statement in a meeting of LDP people that, women lie about rape all the time, we shouldn't take women seriously. When she said that, the room full of elderly men laughed. And the point of the editorial here is that if that room was 50% women, they wouldn't have laughed. It was, she was kind of yucking it up for acceptance by the old men, and it's a good point. In Japan, by the way, for those of you who don't know, the electoral system, one thing I used to love was electoral systems. The US has what's called a first-past-the-post system. It's a winner-takes-all. You have generally one representative per district, and you can have, basically in every district, whoever wins represents, which means that if you've got a party in the country that has like 30% support, but they don't win a single seat, they will be represented with 0% representation. You have to win. And what that generally causes is, of course, it causes fewer parties to be represented, even though Americans probably have all sorts of different views. The two largest views, or the views that can hold a majority, sometimes a third, but generally the two biggest parties are the only ones that can win. And generally, there's a tendency for men to win more often in those. It results in a sort of like the winner takes all in every situation results in a kind of a distorted view of representation. Japan compensates for that by having mixed member proportional representation, which is that they do have districts, just like in America, except in Japan you can have multiple representatives from a district. So, for example, they might take, where in Tokyo, they might have a vote where rather than there being one person who represents, there'll be like 6 people who represent. So there'll be 20 people running, and the people who get the 6 people who get the most votes will represent. And the parties will stack this with multiple members, but there again, they'll have to be strategic about if they put too many people in, or they don't focus on certain people, they might not get enough votes to meet the 6-person threshold. So one, they get better diversity through having multiple representative districts. The other thing is that about half the seats in Parliament are based on party lists, which is that you vote for who you want to represent your district, as well as which party you want to vote for. And the idea is that the final mix of the parties in Parliament is based on the party vote. So they'll top up. If one party wins every district, then they won't need to be topped up. But if you've got parties that, for example, don't win so many district seats, but they get a lot of party votes, then they'll be able to have their numbers made up in Parliament and adjusted through a party list, where they'll publish a list of these are the people in order, that will, based on the number that we get, will nominate people in this order. And you can review who's on the list, but generally speaking, if you support like the Green Party, or the Crazy Wacky Party or something like that, some of them might actually get into Parliament based on the party vote. So there's this idea that, at least in Japan, there's more opportunity for diversity based on the party list system. You can stack that with women, and in the multiple representative districts. And there are parties in Japan that have nearly 50% members in Parliament are women. But the problem that the LDP has with such underrepresentation, you can say that Mio Sugita is kind of a result of that. I mean, apart from the fact that they seem to have taken under their wing somebody who is more anti-woman than the elderly men are. This person points out it also creates an environment where maybe women who aren't like that actually feel like they have to be like that. And it's a legitimate point. I mean, it's another reason that while I don't like the idea of coerced, quotas for the sake of quotas, I think to the extent they are to correct a problem until things sort of become normal on their own, it's clearly got a lot of negative consequences. I mean, when you've got laws right now, one of the biggest debates or political themes at the moment is on fertility and the birth rate. And this is all being decided pretty much by elderly men. I mean, of course, they're getting advice from bureaucrats who just focus on this for a living. But you have to ask, how competent is a parliament, is a group of 280-year-old plus men on deciding, on how to promote, inclusion of women in the workplace, which they're specifically doing, and it's a good thing. And things such as, fertility treatment coverage and so on. I think it's a good point. And in a way, I think we'll have less Mio Sugitas, and I think, and the men who are like her as well. If we could actually somehow foster more representation. The problem is, I guess, when you have people like that in that party, it's obviously going to be hard to attract moderate women, which is clearly what the LDP needs. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm just going to scroll back. I don't see any comments highlighted to me, so I'll catch up later. Very good to see. We've got DJ Sunnyside Up, another member of the Tokyo Digital crew. Excellent to see you. We've got JMac217. Yo, good to see you. Yeah, thanks for the thumbs up. And remember, by the way, thumbs up help. So appreciate if you like it. Please do that. This was interesting. There was an independent panel. It was actually not a government panel. It was a private sector panel which was reviewing the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic. I didn't put that in the title because I think you automatically get demonetized just for saying that. They'll just assume it's some conspiracy theorist or something already. So, but this is a thing that came out this week, and it was just an initial review at all the way that the government handled and responded to the crisis and an evaluation. This sort of thing happens a lot, by the way, in Japan. Japan is very good on saihatsu boshi. Saihatsu means reoccurrence. Boshi means prevention. Saihatsu boshi. And it's often that while Japan can be terrible at handling novel crises and people run around not knowing what to do, what they'll be very good at doing is doing an investigation afterwards about what happened and creating a manual for, okay, next time this thing happens, we're going to have a really good system for dealing with it so we won't look like we're running around with our heads chopped off. And this is what happened, for example, after the Kobe earthquake. The Kobe earthquake was a disaster for more than 72 hours. There were no emergency. The fire and ambulances and so on couldn't even get into the city because the roads going in and out of Kobe were blocked off by landslides. The city burned and there was no rescue for more than 72 hours, and there are a bunch of the city refused self-defense force assistance, and they did like everything that could be done wrong they did wrong, and there was a massive years-long review of this, and it really actually contributed to the relatively amazing response to the Miyagi earthquake and the tsunami that followed. However, of course, there was the nuclear accident. That was a new thing. And there was a similar report on that, which resulted in the reason that the nuclear power plants are all shut down right now is that it resulted in the development of a prevention of reoccurrence manual, a Seihatsu Boshi manual, which was created by a huge investigation afterwards that said, okay, if a mega quake like this ever happens again, we need to make sure that the nuclear plants will all be safe. And so they created the safety criteria that require these enormous walls. They require all these enormous sort of safety backups. And earthquake resilience and tsunami resilience for every nuclear power plant in Japan. And right now they're spending billions putting in those safety measures. So yeah, Japan is kind of good at doing the investigation afterwards and implementing those, relatively speaking. And this is the first one of those about the coronavirus pandemic. And the results that came out so far just pretty much said that the government had no strategy, they had no plan, they were being entirely reactive. And the result of that was that because they were sort of panicking and reacting and doing stuff off the cuff, there was a lot of inefficiency. For example, what was one thing that was pointed out was what to do with the schools. In late February, the government just arbitrarily announced, I think on a Friday, that there'll be no school anywhere in the country for Monday. And, this kind of threw the whole country into panic. The schools didn't know what to do, the parents didn't know what to do, and this caused the next week. The government was kind of needing to deal with the fallout of this decision to close the schools, which apparently resulted in the decision, the next decision to be taken on travel in and out of the country and what to do about that being delayed because the government all of a sudden became focused on firefighting on the school issue. And, and there were contradictory messages. Apparently, like, for example, the Tokyo governor used the word lockdown, which caused a kerfuffle in government. Nobody could agree what that meant or what they were going to do, if they were actually going to do a lockdown like in other countries. So, yeah, they sort of pointed out it was all chaotic, basically. It was all chaos and there was a lack of strategy. And it was pretty, critical of the government, saying that it was all kind of a blind, uncontrolled panic. And first of all, they're going to do this first report at the moment on how things were handled and how everything progressed, creating a record of it. And then they're going to start making recommendations on, in future cases like this for future pandemics, how they could do it better. They are pretty good at this, so it'll be interesting to see. It is highly critical of the government, but, this is what you do when you do a reflection, a hansei-sho, a self-reflection document. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see what happens. This came out this week, and those were the highlights, apparently. the red value. You have to head back to your own stuff now. Have a good rest of the day with your stuff. And Sergeant Bilko, I guess either clapping hands or emoji or DJ Sunnyside Up is banned too. I guess you're right. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. 1 second, let me. Moving on. I feel like I'm being more structured today. I'm talking about the stuff, I'm doing comments, and then I'm moving on. This probably makes it more editable. I'm being a little bit mindful of that, but yeah, we'll keep digging in. Experts have compiled a report, 2020 hindsight. That's exactly what it is, by the way. That's what Saihatsuboshi is. It's handling a crisis perfectly 6 months after it happened. But the thing about Japan is that there are so many crises and so many disasters that, yeah, eventually they all happen again, at some point. And there's probably going to be another nuclear accident. There's definitely going to be another tsunami. There's definitely going to be another pandemic. And they are pretty good at building up institutional knowledge about how to deal with these things. But certainly what's happened, if you look at Kobe, if you look at the Shinrikyo thing, if you look at the tsunami, if you look at the nuclear accident, Japan is not the best at dealing with things the first time. You look at the pandemic, they're not good at dealing with things the first time, although they kind of do stumble through. But generally what they are good at is when they have a manual, and those manuals are only good if they go through and they, and they're actually really tough on how they sort of self-reflect about it. They're pretty good at redoing things and setting up systems later on. It's not very good for, the time. The big one, of course, when a mega quake, when the Nankai quake hits Osaka, or a big earthquake hits Tokyo, there are things already that experts are saying that Tokyo, we're screwed. There's no evacuation plan. There's no resettling plan. There's all these things that we know are going to happen. But sometimes these things, they just don't get done until after it actually happens. And that's partly scary, but yes. Aaron, how are the emissions in Fukushima these days? Good question. I don't know if there are emissions. I certainly haven't seen anything about it. What is happening, of course, is that while they are dismantling the nuclear power plant there, they still need to keep the core with all the melted material inside. They still need to keep it cool. If they just ignored it, if they stopped cooling it, it would still go into another sort of, it could explode or cause another sort of event there. So they do need to constantly pump water through it to keep it cool. And by running water through basically an exposed melted core, they can't run it through like in a safe way. They have to actually directly expose the water to the radioactive material in the plant. So what's happening is not so much the air emissions coming out of the plant that are the problem. I think they've sealed that, or they've covered that. But they have something like trillions of tons of water contaminated with tritium that they used for cooling the site, that they that they haven't allowed to run off into the ocean or anything. So they are storing it in these massive water tanks on site. But the problem is that they're running out of physical space. I don't know that there's any place on Earth with more water stored up than the contaminated water around Fukushima. And there is this problem that Fukushima itself has said, hey, I think we're going to have to release all of this into the water. The fishing industry around Fukushima is, of course, outraged, and South Korea, on the other coast, on a different sea, is worried about this as well. But they say they just can't keep all the water stored up there. And so apparently the water is full of tritium, which has a shorter half-life, I think, than a lot of the material actually inside the reactor. And they say it can be relatively safe. It breaks down relatively quickly. But yeah, that's just up the coast from Tokyo. It's not very far away, and they're talking about releasing a lot of that into the ocean. So that's the main headline about Fukushima. Kangen Kodos, Google Japan radiation map. It's very accurate. There are many groups still doing daily testing. Yeah, and that's right. There were a lot of people actually who didn't trust the government data, so there's a lot of independent testing of that. I'm curious what it looks like myself. I do remember, even when it was bad, of course, we all learned a lot about radiation at that time, including the fact that your exposure on a 3-hour flight, from Japan to Hong Kong to escape from the radiation from Fukushima, exposed you to more radiation than you had experienced by staying in Tokyo for, like a year. You're actually exposed to a lot of radiation when you're in airplanes. So, yeah, of course, it's something that, because people don't understand it very well, it's scary, but at the same time, it's also been an opportunity. I never left the whole time we were here. And, there were a lot of people who were very panicked and saying that I should leave, and, but we'll see. But so far it hasn't been so bad anyway. So, moving on, controversy over Science Council of Japan appointments. I think I mentioned this last week, that, there's a law in Japan that basically there's a council of scientific advisors that advises the Japanese government, but they are they're sort of independent, but they're appointed by law. It's a government-funded committee that has hundreds of scientists and scholars and whatnot that can advise the Japanese government on various different things, as well as third parties. They can advise private. Apparently, they have advised the Chinese government on a bunch of things as well, on matters of science or technology or whatnot. And among the people who were up for appointment this year, what's happened is this was established in 1956 under a law that said that the government will, basically the committee itself will nominate the people that they think should join the committee for the next round, and sort of as a formality, the Prime Minister would rubber stamp it. In the debate in Parliament in 1956 when it was established, they said, there was a question asked, will the Prime Minister actually ever have the right to veto any of these people? And it was sort of said, well, no, the intention is not that the Prime Minister will veto it, we'll just make that the procedure. However, what happened this time was there were 6 members, 6 out of the 105 nominees for this council had been really kind of strong, harsh critics of Abe and the Abe government. One of them was a political scientist, and there were a couple of other people who were just critical of the Abe administration and certain policies and things that they had done. And one thing about Shinzo Abe is that he has notoriously thin skin. He really cannot handle criticism at all. He always sort of avoids it. But apparently he had made up his mind before Suga became prime minister that these 6 people are not going to be appointed. They're not going to get the cushy government advisory job because they'd hurt his feelings. So when it came up, Abe was out of the picture, but Suga followed through, and he only approved 99 of the 106 appointees, which is the first time in like 70 years or something that any of the recommended appointees had ever been refused by the Prime Minister. And people are saying, well, that's actually a violation of the intent behind the law. It's sort of people are challenging if he had the authority, but he's said, hey, I have the authority. It requires my approval. I get to say. And so right now the opposition and the committee is saying, well, are you going to censor scientists that you don't like going forward? And he actually responded, I haven't even seen the list, which is probably true. He's doing this for Abe. But it does set a pretty awful precedent, a bit like what we're seeing in America, that we're, they're actually choosing and politicizing scientific advice, and avoiding people that are critical, which is kind of not what you want for that. So that's been a bit of a scandal. Check this out. Above is the regular small Kit Kat packs that you can buy. That typically parents would buy these for kids who are about to take exams, because Kit Kat, one of the reasons that Kit Kats are so popular in Japan is that Kit Kats sounds very much like Kitokatsu. Kitokatsu means Kito, you're definitely going to, Katsu, win, you're definitely going to win. So when parents are encouraging their kids like during exam times or whatever, there's this kind of weird, it's probably very clever marketing that Kit Kat has convinced Japanese people it's kind of good luck to give your kids Kit Kats. Clever marketing. So, they're very popular in Japan. However, Kit Kat, when asked, the new packs that they've released are slightly smaller. And they asked why. When asked why have they made them smaller, they said, well, we're being mindful of the amount of sugar and health and whatever, and we've just tried to reduce the amount of sugar and so on, so that it's a little bit healthier, but still a satisfying snack for everybody. The Japanese internet reaction is that kito kato, the other way that you could say kato, is that it certainly looks like it's been cut. As you can say cut as well for cutting. And that is how it looks. It looks like they're just trying to save money, coming up with excuses. Maybe they're just not going to win so much. But that's an unfortunate, sad times. There again, at least they're not going out of business. If this is what saves their business, cut away. But there you go. Kit Kats, not as long as they used to be. I will be doing another episode with JJ Walsh next week. Apparently, there was something, I think I've got the thing later on actually, but there was a very cool, apparently her podcast talking about sustainability in Japan has been ranking really well in India, and apparently our show together that we did, which is going to be a regular thing. What the Sustainability, I think, is the going to be the title of it, which we're talking about doing it monthly, but I think we might be doing it even at a higher frequency than that. We're going to do one next week anyway, but apparently it was the most downloaded new podcast in India. I don't know that I didn't. It is kind of funny. I actually have some Indian relatives, and when I follow them and my Indian co-workers on Facebook and whatnot, they do. There is a thing I've noticed that people in India do post a lot about sort of sustainability and positive thinking things a lot, and I was kind of find that interesting. Don't know if that's a national thing, but for the people that I follow, that is a thing. But it's funny. Apparently, me and JJ Walsh talking about environmental and sustainability news in Japan is a really popular downloaded podcast in India. So that was a thing. So we're doing that next Friday. That should be fun. I'll promote that. Oh, you know what? It's this coming Friday, so I will promote it on my Twitter when we're going to do it, and I'll let you know next week where the link is to watch it. It will be a lot of fun. Same deal as this, except last time. We'll just be talking about news stories that we think are cool, that are about like environmental technology and sustainability and whatnot, but with a Japan focus. This week, Alicia Ivalich from Non-Native Creative, she got featured on the podcast, and it was a good show. Chillin Kansai, I was just actually watching the recording of that, him talking about his Teslas and sort of battery tech. That was she did a show with him recently. I've just heard that my Argonauts, Jason Sumo channel, he's going to be doing an episode with her as well, talking about sumo. So she's covering everybody actually, and she's very, very good at preparing and interviewing. So I think it's a great way to it's a great series to watch. So she just hit, congratulations, of course, to JJ Walsh on hitting the 500 subscriber threshold the other day. But her engagement is really, really awesome as well, and she posts on everything. Her live streams are visible on at least on Twitter and YouTube, maybe on Twitch as well. Probably not on Twitch, but she's covering a lot of space, so she's probably getting a lot of viewers. And she's big in India, so that is really awesome. But yeah, so check these out. The Chillin Kansai, you can see down the bottom, and Alicia. They were both really, really good shows, and I'll be back on it myself next week. So be sure subscribe and follow JJ Walsh, and they're good videos. Dan H, good to see you, Dan H. Let me just quickly go back and see if there's did I hear about Masateru Shiraishi and LGBT comments? This is the Masateru Shiraishi is the Adachi-ku politician. I mean, the sort of silly stuff that whoops, I've lost it. We're back. I think that's the Adachi-ku guy, right? The elderly Adachi local politician. That, yes, I heard about that, of course. And you know what? I think it's not a new story, or someone like this said this before, which is that, again, when you tell an elderly 80-year-old plus LDP politician, which they all seem to be, that, hey, we're going to recognize LGBT marriage, and I've heard of reactions like this in places like Australia and America as well, that some people react. If we legalize, LGBT, if we recognize LGBT marriage, or we give them equality, that means we're all going to be LGBT, which means that we're not going to have children anymore, because we're all just going to be like having sex with each other. Men with men and women with women. It'll be anarchy, and the country, the human race will die out. I've heard people say this, actually. I've heard like crazy people say this in other countries. I cannot even compute how some people react to the idea of treating LGBTQ and all the other letters people, or ethnic minorities, treating anyone as equal somehow means that you're going to become that. And it's like your fear, they're literally like, it's like their inner voice that they should be actually thinking and processing and suppressing. That, does that mean I'm going to be gay if we recognize gay people? And they come out and they say, we can't have this, because if we're all gay, if they let us be gay, there won't be any children. I mean, one of the stupidest possible things you could say, but people say it more often than you'd think, and I suspect there's a little bit of Dr. Freud at play when these things come out. Sometimes it's true. In so many countries, the most vociferous opponents of equal rights and recognition of LGBT people, I mean, why do you even care of just treating people equally? Yet sometimes the people who are most vociferously against it turn out in the fullness of time to be that themselves, and their way of dealing with their own confusion is by becoming like an enemy of it, like nobody can be it. And it's motivated quite often, I think, by the fear that it's what they're going to be themselves or what they're trying to suppress. That's my amateur psychology theory on it. But yes, indeed, we had another one of those cases in Adachi. Adachi is, I decided a while ago to go a little bit easier on Adachi. In Tokyo, the poorest neighborhood and the richest neighborhood, I could take you to, Adachi is known for being one of the poorest neighborhoods, one of the poorest wards in the 23 wards of Tokyo. That's it. I could take you to the richest part of Setagaya or Minatoku, like the fancy wards, and I could take you to straight from there to Adachi-ku, and you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't be able to tell me which was rich and which was not. I mean, maybe you would. Maybe you'd notice more Mercedes-Benzes in one of them. But fundamentally, when you talk about rich and poor in Japan, it took me about 5 years before I could even tell the difference. But yeah, Adachi-ku. Kind of known as the closest thing to Skid Row that Tokyo has, which is not. It's a normal. They have lovely. I take my son there. They've got wonderful big parks there. It's actually a cool place, and there are lots of cool people from there. But yes, when you play into negative stereotypes, the fact that they have a politician who said that doesn't help. So that is a thing. Next story. That's right, I've already flipped over the story a little bit too early. Just scanning back to check there's no other comments. But yes, Dan H. I think that's the guy, right? I hope I was talking about the right subject there. To YY, excellent to see you, by the way. And Accent, good to see you. Milk River, I don't know what that means, but yes. I'm sure I agree. By the way, everyone check out Accent. Accent does really cool. I love the Sierra Cosworth that you put up on Facebook the other day. I actually really loved the. I love that he basically does graphic design of like 80s cars as race cars and stuff like that. And I just love the cars that you do, dude. Like, I love the Ford Escorts and stuff that you do, but I really love the old school MR2. Like that to me, the 80s, the small MR2, the original one. That was one of the coolest ones. They just got sort of bigger and weird after that. So Accent, I really do follow your stuff, and I actually do really like it. And everybody, if you want to see some cool cars, follow Accent on Instagram. But coming back to Auntie Liana, konbanwa, good to see you, Auntie Liana, good to have you here. And to YY, good to see you. I forgive you for supporting the Wallabies, I think, today. That was a terrible game. Today New Zealand played Australia, which, I paid to watch it, and New Zealand was crap. We were very lucky to get away with a draw in that game. But, it's good for the team to have a couple of rusty games. The real question, Dan H., is what are my thoughts on vegan butter? I'm not looking. It's a great emoji. I don't know how you got that color there. Well, yeah. I mean, what's the point? Again, it's do vegans really want to eat butter? Surely they could eat better things than imitation. I mean, that's just like chemical margarine, right? You could have soya oil based, imitation margarine. I would eat it. If there was no butter, I would have it. But I'm from New Zealand, and if there's a piece of bread, and I'm gonna eat it, and there is within easy reach. If there was some crappy soy, lab made margarine, or there was some real, straight out of the cow salted butter. That's probably going to shorten my life by 5 years eating it. I mean, that's the stuff I'm going to go for every time. That's the real deal. So no, vegan butter. It's not that I have a problem with vegan stuff. I mean, there's plenty of vegan food that's wonderful, but why make crappy imitations of excellent non-vegan stuff, right? So, I guess my opinion is no. I'm not into the idea of vegan butter. And thank you for asking. I actually had more to say about that than I realized. I've also just realized. I've got a rush. Well, I don't think I have that many more. I think I'm going to be on time still. I think I've got a good chance, but thank you for asking. Kang and Kodos says, Milk River, we lost a whole milk truck here in Japan. The milk went. I see what's happening here. I see what you guys are doing. Okay, I'm not going to get more drawn into the butter thing. This movie looks good. Ryan Reynolds, I like. He's a good actor. I love Deadpool. I loved how he did that. The creators of Deadpool have written a movie. The trailer looks. It doesn't look like the best movie. Like it's not like critics rush out to watch this movie, but it does look like it'll be watchable. And it is the idea of the background characters that are like walking around in video games like Grand Theft Auto and so on. It looks a little bit like a cross between, I hope not Wreck-It Ralph, but it looks a little bit like a cross between Wreck-It Ralph and The Truman Show, where basically somebody realizes that their existence is being a background character in a video game which real people are coming in and playing, and I guess he becomes a self-aware AI. Not actually a completely, there are actual Black Mirror episodes, well, not exactly like that, but kind of like that, about games involving, captured AI, digital personalities that have self-awareness. So I doubt it's going to be anything like look at that. It's not a Black Mirror episode, but it looks like the trailer actually looked pretty good. And given that there are so few movies getting made right now, and this one actually looks kind of decent, yeah, I'm actually up for this. I'm looking forward to it. By the way, I also did watch a movie. I watched a couple of movies. One was really bad. Oh, yeah. Okay, I watched a couple of movies lately. Okay, I'm gonna. First of all, I've never wanted to watch Ted before. It just looks like crap, and I wanted to avoid it. But I was watching on YouTube, people reflect on their careers, a sort of an interview series with famous actors. And there's one with Mark Wahlberg, who I still like to call Marky Mark, because I just think Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch was just like the best name for somebody ever to come out as a singer. And credit to the guy. He's made a lot of, Boogie Nights is one of the best movies I've ever seen. So Mark Wahlberg kind of gets a pass as an actor with me. He's made some really good movies. He's made some not so good movies as well, but he's done okay. So when he said he was offered the idea of a TED, and he said, no way, forget about it. And then he was convinced basically by Seth, what's his face, the producer, that this is actually a really interesting concept and it's a good idea. And he was sold on the idea, so he made the movie. And I was like, oh, there's actually a really good idea in this. Well, you know what? I've got nothing else to do. I'm going to watch Ted. And Ted turned out to be exactly as crappy as I thought it would be. It was like Pixels bad. And this kind of comes to the point, a movie like that, if they had just put Adam Sandler in it, at least it would have just been completely to expectation. They kind of put Marky Mark in, I think, to avoid the idea that it was going to be like another Sandler movie, but that's what it was. But then I was thinking, and everyone said, yeah, afterwards I heard the comment on Twitter that, yeah, that should have been a Sandler movie. And I was like, yeah, and now that you think about it, I've heard people saying that that Uncut Gems on Netflix was getting good reviews, so I watched that, and screw me, that was a good movie. It was kind of like, I suppose, if Sandler's going to play a serious role, playing a super annoying, frustrating person is probably the best way for him to go. But that was, it was a good movie. And I actually, last night I watched a movie, Doctor Sleep, which is a Stephen King supported. It's a sequel to The Shining, and it was kind of like, I was wondering how they were going to do that. Obviously they don't have Kubrick around. They didn't try to make it a Kubrick style movie. It's a different style movie, but they did a pretty good job of coherently continuing The Shining while actually having a good story. So I was actually, I liked the movie, and I'm not a horror fan. It wasn't as horror as I thought it would be. But it was a good movie. So, if you're looking for stuff to watch, there isn't a lot of good stuff right now on Netflix, so check those out anyway. Aaron, have I seen Ryan Reynolds' YouTube channel with his ridiculous and hilarious ads? I have not. Hugh Jackman is engaged too. They are top notch. I believe you. Actually, I feel like going and checking it out. Thanks for the tip. I don't know, I've got a thing where, like, Will Smith, when he started a YouTube channel, I was like, oh God, and lots of people signed up for it. But if that's what you want, that's kind of cool. But I'm kind of, seeing old media trying to be cool. It's like your uncle dancing to me, having like famous actors trying to have cool YouTube channels. But if Ryan Reynolds does it good, I'll check that out. Thank you for the thank you for the suggestion. And Seth, is it Seth Rogen? Is it Seth Rogen? I think it's Seth Rogen, the producer of Ted. Anyway, it's crap, so don't watch it. But I'm up for this. This I'm hopeful. I am hoping this will not be another TED. It's got all the right things going for it. A fun park in Tokyo, Yomiuri Land, is promoting itself as a place for people to work. If they are in a cramped apartment and they can't focus, you can work on a Ferris wheel. I could think of worse things. I like to have lots of monitors and be comfortable when I'm working, but I could see an upside to that. It'd make for good video conferences. So again, the fun parks trying to figure out how to remain in business when people won't go to them as fun parks, offering them as workspaces is an interesting idea. Meg Igarashi. She's a Japan-based YouTuber. I think she's American by birth and growing up, but I think Japanese heritage, and she's living in Japan. And yeah, I've met her a couple of times. She sort of is around the Japanese community a little bit, but more than a sort of a YouTuber. She works in video production, and she's someone who actually cares about making actual creative YouTube content. And she's made a bunch of short films and stuff like that, and she's very good at what she does actually. And she's a really Indira. She's great. I mean, everything. I can't think of a single thing about her that's like not cool. And yeah, she was posted. I caught this thing where this was a film that she made like a while ago. Apparently, it's like 2 minutes and 49 seconds, and it got some sort of award. And it's a short film. I'm like, I've seen short films, but not 2-minute 49 short films. So I have to tell you, watch this. Check this out. Check out Meg Igarashi's My Road Reel 2020: The Best Worst Day. 2 minutes 49. You'll thank me for it. It's a really good short film, and it's watchable, and it just doesn't feel like 2 minutes 49, and I mean that in a good way. So yeah, that was awesome. Butakusa, yeah, I didn't keep it to an hour, but yeah, well, I'll be close. That's the first will have Wi-Fi. I assume it has Wi-Fi. It would have to have Wi-Fi to offer that, but yeah. Brace yourselves, the Butakusa is coming. I made that because I got itchy eyes the other day. In Japan, there are like two general hay fever seasons. There's the big hay fever season that everybody gets when the Japanese pines, the matsu, that dominate the mountains of Japan, that are like everywhere in Japan. They all release pollen into the air at the same time in March. And if you are allergic to that stuff, then March through April is just absolute hell for you in Japan. And a lot of people really suffer from this. I know people who leave the country during that period because they suffer so much from it. So much so that there are weather forecasts which actually say how much pollen there is in the air day to day in different cities and so on. However, what they don't cover is the second hay fever season, which actually occurs in autumn. And they call it Butakusa, which is literally like pig grass. Honestly, I've had hay fever. I get itchy eyes and hay fever-ish, mild hay fever in September. I don't get it in March and April, thank heavens. But I get it in September, and everyone told me, oh, that's Butakusa. I became curious what Butakusa was. So I remember Googling it and looking around and asking people about it. Like, where is this Butakusa that's causing this? Like the grass? I don't see any grass around. Why am I allergic when there's no grass around? Like, what is this? It turns out Butakusa, pig grass, is more or less... if you have hay fever not in March and April, but you have hay fever or you're reacting allergically to something that seems to be seasonal, in Japan, whatever it is, they'll just call it Butakusa. Butakusa is just like the miscellaneous. It's what they label anything else from any other time of year that causes hay fever, and that's what I get this time of year. I heard some other people when I said that the other day. Generally starts in October or late September. And some other people, right now it's not so bad because we've just had a bunch of rain, but probably when it calms down again, I'm probably going to start up. So it sucks. It lasts until about November. Some other people said, oh yeah, that's why my nose has been going crazy lately. I guess everyone who gets hay fever this time of year is probably worried that it's COVID or something like that. No, you can get some Allegra. It sounds like it's medicine for something else, but no, it's actually just hay fever medicine, and it will take care of it. You're welcome. You can get it from any pharmacy. But it is a thing, and it happens in Japan at this time of year. The Super Nintendo Fun Park, which was going to be opening at Universal Studios in Osaka. It was going to open for the Olympics, but obviously everything kind of went to hell this year. It is going to open next year. It does look like it will be fun. I'm not sure I was always a Sega guy. I had the Game Gear, I had the Mega Drive and the 32X add-on. I never actually had a Nintendo growing up. I've never played Mario in my life, actually. I've never played it, except on the Game & Watch things, except on the very old, like on the original Donkey Kong Game & Watch. That had Mario. That's really all that I've ever played on it. So I'm not super nostalgic about this, but I know a lot of people who are into Japan are, and it's another good reason if you're into the theme parks anyway. Also, Osaka has a bunch, Universal Studios and Nintendo World, so that'll be a cool thing. Oh, so there is which park was this again? There is a new life-size Godzilla. Check that out. You can actually zip line into a real, so the Nijigen no Mori theme park in Awaji, Hyogo. That's in Kobe, basically. Okay, I thought it was around Tokyo, but again, West Japan theme park. You can actually now, if you want to ride into a life-size Godzilla mouth, you can do it. Looks kind of cool. There is a funny side note on this. I have a cousin who is actually, he's kind of a cool, well, he's a cool guy. He actually is a graphic artist who actually writes stories and illustrates for the still ongoing and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or now TNMT, like the actual graphic novels and stuff, like more dark and more a little bit adult focused than the sort of cartoons and the TV series and so on. It's the actual paper graphic novels that he writes, and he's actually written, I think, the sort of graphic novel or comic versions of the real Ghostbusters as well. In the US, he lives in Melbourne, but he actually has been published in the US, and he actually is involved in a lot of this sort of stuff with a lot of these sort of franchises. And I won't say too much, but he came to me the other day saying that he was working on they were getting a license from Toho, I'm not going to say anything else, for doing a graphic novel. And he was kind of interested in setting it in sort of a cyberpunk near future where it wouldn't be set in Japan entirely, but Japan would be there. But he doesn't want it to be sort of a Japanese style graphic novel. He wants it to do it as a Western one. But he asked me, what would be a realistic sort of description of geopolitics in Japan in 2045 for a cyberpunk graphic novel? And I was like, dude, have you come to the right place? And I within 10 minutes, I'd written like 2 pages of notes, which I sent to him, which I would love to actually share here, my view of like what a cyberpunk 2045 to 2050 would look like in Japan. Thing is, I gave him way more detail than he would ever actually use. I practically wrote in my head the entire idea of a graphic novel. It was actually really fun. It's cool to have a cuz who does something like that. So I'm going to let him take the 2% of what I gave him that's useful and put that into his idea and his pitch to go get the license and create the novel. And I'll definitely share when something like that comes out. It's got a little bit of Japan related stuff, and probably after it's all out and safe, I may one day remind me, put a pin on that and get me to share my notes in time. I don't want to do it ahead of time, because it's a very cool project and I don't want to release any details of it without any permission other than that. But it was really, really cool, and like I say, it was I was very happy to get that question. In a way, what I did was basically thinking exactly Bob Turner. I was thinking, if in the same way that Akira was written in the late 1980s and early 1990s, looking at Japan in 2020, I was thinking, well, what if we wrote Akira today, looking at to 2045 or 2050? That was what I had in my head, and it was pretty good. I mean, he's a professional story writer as well as an artist. I can think of ideas. I can throw ideas at people all day, but I actually fancy I could probably write a story. But I'd need a lot of time to focus on it. But he's got the actual skills. He's an actual artist. He can actually do that sort of thing. So, yeah, even to be able to throw ideas at him was really, really fun. So anyway, I'll share that one day. The Japan Rail Pass. If you've traveled to Japan, you'll know about this. It's basically a super cheap, all-you-can-ride trail pass. You can ride all the bullet trains, all the subways, all the JR lines. Anyway, not the private trains. Although it might even be expanded to that. It's awesome. I used it when I was a student, and I miss not being able to use it living here as a resident. But apparently, because right now there are no tourists. The JR's decided to offer in 2020 a 3-day Japan Rail Pass for foreign residents of Japan, i.e. anyone who's living in Japan who normally wouldn't be eligible because you need to be here on a tourist visa normally to get a Japan Rail Pass. But they're going to let us permanent residents and people, all you need is a foreign passport. Hey, Mogberry Pie, good to see you. All you need is a foreign passport and you can get a cheap, all-you-can-ride around rail pass. Now, of course, I must admit, I'm getting fatigued. My outrage is getting fatigued. The idea of this whole Go-To campaign that during a pandemic, why is everyone promoting traveling around everywhere? Doesn't seem like a good idea. But at the same time, look, it's wearing me down. This sounds like a good idea. And frankly, we've had steady numbers in spite of these campaigns going. There's still 200 cases a day right now in Tokyo. But most other prefectures have really low numbers, and basically all of these Go-To travel campaigns, they are taking a lot of precautions and people are being careful. And obviously Japan doesn't have a goal of eliminating the virus like New Zealand seems to have been successful at doing, but they're doing a pretty good job at managing it. So I think with all reasonable precautions, this is a good idea. And I tell you, if you're stuck in Japan and you want to travel and you're willing to be careful to make sure you're being responsible and doing it safely, this is a wonderful, wonderful thing. It will cost for 12,000 yen. You get 3 days of basically traveling on all the trains that you like. Now, bear in mind, a bullet train from Tokyo to Nagoya costs more than that. So, you could go all the way from Kagoshima, like all the way up to Sapporo, in 3 days you could go crazy with this, and you would get value back just by the time you got to Nagoya. So it really is, it's great value. So highly recommended looking it up if that's your thing. The Hanko, the association. Oh, this is funny. Yeah, okay. The association of parliamentarians that fought back against the abandonment of Hankos, the group of lawmakers who are for protecting Hanko culture, are protesting to the head of the LDP, to the party president, about please, we must stop this abandonment of Hankos. The head of the LDP said back to them, why don't you gather a list of signatures? I guess in Shome can mean signature and it can mean Hankos. He said gather a petition, which I thought was a funny comeback. And he was probably serious. He probably didn't realize the irony of what he was saying. Oh, God. I thought I'd get through the topic so easily. Okay, I'm going to power through. This is frustrating. I'll talk about this another week. This is a former Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry bureaucrat, elite bureaucrat, 85 years old or something. A year ago or so, he ran over, he was driving, it looks like another case where an elderly person just put their foot on the wrong pedal. This happens in a lot of places. The car accelerated through a crowded intersection in Ikebukuro, injured dozens of people, and actually squarely ran over a woman and her baby child and killed them. It looks like, again, one of these cases where it was just an elderly person who put their foot on the wrong pedal and, meant to brake and they accelerated, and it was a tragic accident, but leading to death. However, first of all, because this person is a former elite bureaucrat, the police didn't touch this person. Normally you would arrest someone in these circumstances and detain them at least for a time. The police didn't touch this person. It looked like there were probably government people coming and intervening to sort of shield him. And when they did, he denied any responsibility. He said the car accelerated all by itself, there's something wrong with the Toyota. And Toyota actually came in and they actually inspected the car and the drive record and everything. And they found there was nothing wrong happened. It was clearly the old guy put his foot on the pedal. But now he's coming to a negligent driving causing death trial, where he's still refusing to admit any responsibility. He's blaming Toyota. He says this is a defect in the Toyota car. It wasn't my fault. And he's pleading innocent, which is causing a lot of bashing from the public and a lot of feeling that he was given extremely lenient treatment. I mean, when you think that someone like Carlos Ghosn was held in jail for like 1.5 years for a corporate crime of getting overpaid or something, and this guy ran over dozens of people and killed a woman and a baby, and is defiantly denying any responsibility for it, and he's been sort of free the whole time. There's this the web thing is saying that this is what happens for upper class privileged elite people in Japan. They get a different standard, and clearly that seems to be the case. And this is the thing as well. The police are often they'll go easy on you, and they might let you go out on bail if you admit to it. But if you don't admit to it, if you don't give them the confession that they want, they really, really are tough in Japan. And yet this guy is defiant, and the police are being deferential to him. So that's frustrating, and it's getting a lot of critical coverage from the press and the internet. Nissan, this is a bigger topic and maybe one for the podcast with JJ Walsh. But right now in Japan, of course, Honda's just released an electric car, like a kind of expensive but quite good looking sort of Honda Civic takeoff. But basically Toyota doesn't have any. They've got a fuel cell car which runs on hydrogen, and they've got hybrid cars obviously, but they aren't making any pure EVs. They've just gone for a different technology. The only company that's really going all in on electric vehicles is Nissan. They've got the Nissan Leaf, and they're about to release some more cars. And I think it's a smart play when you look at what Tesla is doing and all these cool electric cars that are coming out right now, and how the Japanese car industry looks like it's lagging behind. Again, Nissan doesn't really deserve it. They're doing badly, and it's kind of their own fault. But I think this is a smart play that they're going to try to beat Honda and Nissan to the punch with EVs. And that's what they're doing. So I'm hoping we're going to see some cool, fast electric EVs coming out of Japan from Nissan first. And I'm also really interested to see what Toyota and, hey, Onek, thank you. Wow. That's awesome. You don't need to do that, but I do appreciate it. So yeah, super interested to see what happens with the car industry here. The whole car industry at the moment, the space industry, to me, they're so exciting. Just finally, they're changing, right? Finally, we're getting the technology I was expecting as a kid to already be well established by now. It's finally happening, and it's happening so fast. There are so many really cool electric cars coming out. There's so much cool space stuff. And yeah, Tesla, credit to them, they're pushing it, and it looks like we're waiting to see if Japan can pivot and adapt. And if Nissan's kind of been a den of jackals for a while, but if they do this, credit to them. I will definitely appreciate that. Japan, one of the things about Japan that are awesome, if any of you have been to Japan or live in Japan will know Kotatsus, these sort of coffee desks, which basically you sit around while watching TV, everyone sits on the floor, and it's got like this duvet, which sits under a removable, like you can lift up the lid top and put a square duvet over it, and you can all stick your legs under it, and it has a heater underneath. So it is a thing with Japanese apartments that they're often not well insulated. So these apartments, even with heaters and everything going, will be quite cold. But you get under one of these, it's like being in bed while you're in the living room. And I've lived in homestay houses and so on that had these, and they are wonderful. Except it's really easy to fall asleep under them because they're a heated duvet basically in a living room. But it is the typical Japanese family thing to sit around a table like that, eating, mandarins and watching TV at Christmas time. Normally they are not this big. This is enormous. Normally they'll just be enough to pull over your legs, but this is full body in all directions. And I must admit, I like the idea. I also like the fact that Rocket News used ginormous in the title. But Kotatsus are awesome. I actually did take one back to New Zealand, even though it doesn't really get cold enough to use them, and the heating is good in New Zealand, or at least the insulation is good. The Minister of Health gave a press conference wearing one of those see-through masks. Makes sense. Wearing it like this, if you talk and breathe through your nose and your eyes. This is, if you wanted to do a report summing up the Japanese government's response to the pandemic, this is the Minister of Health. That's pretty awful. So that was the thing that happened. Right now I've got this pop filter. I mentioned this at the start of the thing, so that's cool. And I think this is the final one. Final one is, there are the most popular, most downloaded new podcasts in India, like last week. And check it out. What the Sustainable News Japan, Hiko Simon and JJ Walsh. We're rocking it. We're top. That's crazy. So yeah, apparently, at least on the podcast service, I think that JJ Walsh is using, people like it. So we're gonna make more, and that is cool. Wow, I was so sure I was gonna be done by 11:30, and it is 11:49. I'm way over time, but I'm done. How was the sound? I hope the sound was. I got a little pop filter thing. I was trying to keep my distance from the mic consistent, so hopefully the sound was just a little bit better this week. Owenek, thank you, by the way, for that. I really do appreciate that. I just appreciate everyone who shows up and joins in the comments and says leaves me comments and things to say. Remember, if you like the video, please do remember to click on like. It does help. Remember, I'll be back here every week, same time. I'll be back here next week, 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time, as I am every week. Unless there's some terrible emergency, I'm generally here. As always, you can follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up with me during the week, or reach out or message me or anything like that. So, yes, people enjoyed that picture, so I'll go back one more time. Quick encore performance, the Minister of Health of Japan, people. Our safety in the pandemic is dependent upon this person. So there you go. Have a good week, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Kakite anoki koto after school. Olios and Thomas H. Good to see you. And yes, that is a thing that happened. And look at that. We did a whole hour and 20 minutes, and it was interesting, I thought. And we didn't talk about all that shit show that's happening in America once. So isn't that a good thing? Come back next week for more. See you later. Boom. Peace. Ogaton, excellent to see you. You like komatsu, it's kotatsu, but yes, they are awesome, and I'm glad that you like it as well. Have a good week, everyone. 12-hour time difference, so no worries, no Owenek, don't worry about missing it. And remember, the video is available recorded afterwards anyway, but excellent. So yes, remember to like, and I'll see you later. Peace.